Welcome back to the On the House podcast. My name is Regan Newton, and I will be filling in as your host today. Today I have Chuck Pocock, the owner of Manitou Realty Auction Incorporated. He is a lifelong resident of Rochester, and he has his Indiana real estate broker's license, is a certified residential appraiser, and has his Indiana auctioneer's license. So welcome to the show today, Chuck. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing good.
Doing well. Well, today we're just going to kind of go over some questions that home buyers or people selling their homes may have about the appraisal process.
Okay.
So can you kind of tell us how long you've been an appraiser and what goes into becoming an appraiser?
Well, I received my appraisal license in 1997, and there's several steps. You have to become a trainee for a period of time because you have to get 2,000 hours of appraisal hours in before you advance. And to become a trainee, you have to work underneath a supervisor, so you have to find someone willing enough to share their business and their time to teach you the trade, and then get your 2,000 hours, and then you, from that point on, you test your way up the ladder through the state, and each level has another additional requirement of hours to advance. So that's kind of the way it is.
Okay. And you talked about the supervisor. Are you able to pick the supervisor you go under, or are you kind of assigned?
It's just whoever was willing enough to work with you and share their business.
All right. And I understand you have more than one appraiser that works at Manitou Realty?
I am also a supervisor, so I have Lindsay Strader, who has a trainee status, and she does her own appraising. I just sign off on it.
Okay. All right. And then just a general overview, what's your role in the home buying process as an appraiser?
Well, the bank wants to protect themselves in loaning money, so I'm the eyes and ears for the lender, and part of my obligation is to understand the market and try and predict what typical buyers and sellers will do. So that's kind of what my focus is, and then provide a valuation.
Okay. And are you employed through the bank, or does the bank kind of subcontract you out? How does that process work, and who they choose to do the appraisal for them?
I'm an independent contractor, so they are my client, even though Joe Smith may be buying a house and Joe Smith may be indirectly paying for the appraisal, but my client and my sole obligation is to the bank, and that's who I report to. Okay.
And is there a certain time frame, like once you do the appraisal, do you have to have it back at any certain point?
Well, it kind of predicated upon how busy the market is. If it's, in the dead of summer where most of your buying and selling is taking place and things get spread out over time, and in the slower periods, I think the bank has a little bit faster expectations from appraisers.
Okay. And then do you say that you have anyone reaching out personally to have an appraisal, or is everything coming pretty much from a bank, or could somebody, a homeowner, just say, I want to have my house appraised?
We do a lot of for the for sale by owner type people that they want to have a value because they may want to sell their home, or they've got someone interested in their home but they don't know what the value is, and they'll reach out for our services to try and get a value. And so we do that. We do a lot of estate work when people pass. Obviously, lawyers and need to have values, and then the other side of the business is divorces too. The judges need to know the valuations as well. So a lot of different, lot of broad spectrums of why we do appraisals.
It's not so much just for the lending,
right?
And things like that. Okay. And who chooses appraiser? The appraiser does the owner, the homeowner, have any say in that process? Or?
Back in the old days, that was the case, but after the housing crisis and the federal government kind of took over the appraisal of the appraisal process for all the states, typically banks now have what they call an approved appraiser list, and then someone independent of the mortgage business within the bank randomly choose, they take turns.
Okay.
So it's on a rotation basis.
Okay.
But it has to be someone within the bank that is not part of the mortgage business, so you don't skew things one way.
And do you have a territory that you can serve, or is it all of Indiana, or do you typically not have to go too
obviously
far?
my license covers the whole state of Indiana, but part of the appraisal process is you've got to be knowledgeable in the area you're working in, and so you basically choose your own area that you want to work in that you're comfortable.
Okay. Just off the top of your head, do you know how many appraisers we have here in Fulton County?
I don't. I really don't. It's dwindled a lot.
Yeah.
With all the changes, a lot of people retired.
Mm-hmm. Is it typical for each real estate business to have an appraiser there, or would you say that some don't have a certified appraiser?
A lot of them don't.
A lot of them don't?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I would have guessed the opposite.
Yeah. And then you got a lot of people that are appraisers that don't have any other ties to the real estate business at all.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So back to like the certification, do you have to every so often get another certification or submit more hours, or once you're done, it's a done deal?
No, you have to get every 2 years 28 hours of continuing ed.
Okay. And do you have to, can that be done online, or you have to
It can be, or you travel. It's kind of fun to travel and go places, and then you can actually sit in a classroom and talk to some of your fellow appraisers and kind of compare notes. And
do you find that things are changing every 2 years, like that you're learning more, or is it basically the same stuff you're just going to?
I mean, certain things evolve. Basically, the government, when they make changes, that's the important part for us to make sure we follow along with their changes.
Okay. All right. Now, we'll kind of go into tying into here at Rochester Homes and what we do. Do you go into an appraisal knowing that the home has been built using modular construction?
Before I do an appraisal, a lot of times I've brought up the county tax records, and I know what type of home I'm going to be appraising, just to be somewhat prepared of how big the home is and what type the home is. But as far as a modular home versus a site-built home, we don't differentiate at all
on the outcome of the appraisal.
Right.
Okay. Yep. So if you were just to not look on the tax records, if walking into a home, is there anything that jumps out at you that you would realize it was a modular built home versus a site-built home?
No, I mean, the site-built home and the modular homes, for a lot of practical purposes, are pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the basement or the crawl space and you're looking
so.
around, and the features is, the roof pitch, they're all pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, the manufactured double wide is the one particular component that's relatively different in the residential world.
Okay. And then what are some of the key things that you look for when appraising a home?
Well, you kind of got to look at the neighborhood, see what direction the neighborhood's going. If it's failing, some people are concerned about, there's always that one bad house in the neighborhood they think that's going to ruin their value, or sometimes that exceptionally nice home they think is going to push the whole value of the neighborhood up, and it's not, at least in my perspective, that's not really the case. It's more of what direction the whole neighborhood is heading.
Okay. And along the lines of just homes going in around that neighborhood or homes surrounding that neighborhood, do you see anything as far as businesses? Say a business would be put up around that area, maybe industrial type business. Does that affect the value of the home?
You have to, and we call that, external influences. You got to look around to see if there's something within the neighborhood that might negatively impact, the house or the whole neighborhood. So, yeah, you look for those sort of things.
Do homes built using the modular method appraise differently than homes that are totally built on site?
No, I mean, not. I talked to other appraisers, and nobody differentiates anything, different than a site-built home, and nor do I.
Okay. Are you seeing a change in some of the modular homes that you're appraising versus the ones maybe 10 to 15 years ago?
Well, I think it's like any home, whether it's a site-built home or a modular home, you've got, depending on your affordability, you've got upgrades. The quality of the home can be quite broad. You could have an economy type home, whether it's site built or modular, versus all the way up to the high dollar components.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you appraise a modular home, do you have to use another modular home as your comp, or can you use a site built home within that same area?
Almost every time, unless you have, because bear in mind the appraisal process, most lenders want you to be looking back no further than a year. So if you have a comparable modular home that may have sold that makes a good comparable, you might throw that in there just to show that the public perception of modular homes compares with site-built homes. Now, if you don't have that luxury of having one, then you're going to pick 3 or 4 or 5 site-built homes that match up, as best you can.
Yeah. Do you find that finding comp homes, whether they're modular or site-built, can sometimes be difficult, depending on the area?
Depending on the area, depending on the market. If it's a slow market, sales sometimes, and then we live we've got kind of a broad spectrum of homes, so sometimes finding that comparable isn't
as easy as
I tell people there's just no two homes that are exactly alike, so we've got to.
Yeah. So what happens per se that the appraisal comes in and the homeowner isn't too satisfied with what they think it should be appraised? Do they have any options after that?
That's more of a lender-based question, but I know that there are some lenders that have a policy that if the homeowner is dissatisfied with the appraisal, the underwriters within the bank will kind of look at the appraisal, and if they think that maybe it's a little bit short, they will offer to pay for the second appraisal. The lender will.
Okay.
And then in other cases, if the underwriters at the bank think, that's a pretty good appraisal, and the homeowner wants to pursue it, the bank still does their process of picking another appraiser, but the homeowner is going to have to pick up the bill for the second appraisal.
Okay.
And then from there, I don't know how they choose between two appraisals.
Which one they end up deciding to use. Okay. And I know for new construction, there's an appraisal process before the home is actually built, where you're looking at basically floor plans, the location of the home. Do you typically do you do those type of appraisals, and then once the home is built, do you follow up with the final appraisal, or how does that work? Does it have to be a different appraiser?
No, it's generally if you start the appraisal, and it's basically a subject to appraisal, so it's hypothetical. In other words, we're assuming that we're taking these blueprints and specifications, everything is provided, that hypothetically when it's built, it's going to be as the blueprints say it's going to be. So we can predetermine a value based on comparable sales today, and we'll hypothetically develop that valuation for the subject. And then during the building process, sometimes lenders will pay us to go out there and do periodic inspections as they do draw payments to make sure that
it's kind of where
it's keeping on schedule and that they're not putting out money ahead of time that isn't warranted. So we'll do that. And then the end of the appraisal process, the end of the building process is they may want a final inspection done, and some lenders will pay some additional money and they want a recertification of value that basically it's kind of a twofold thing. We say the home is complete as per plans and specifications, and the market hasn't changed where it adversely affects the previous value.
Okay. Have you ever found that the previous value came out higher in the end?
Well,
or
we
is
don't.
It typically...
It's one of those things. If it's higher, we don't report anything. If something would have taken a turn for the worse, then we would have to report it. But probably the only thing in my appraisal career that on new construction that maybe something was adversely affected is maybe there was a change in the building specifications after the bank made the loan and the appraiser did the appraisal, and all of a sudden they decide, well, we want to change this, and they make something smaller that
as far as
maybe
the floor
cuts
plan
out,
or the footprint of the home.
right?
It's
It
changed.
cuts out some value or something.
Okay. Any unique stories that you care to share?
Well, let's see.
Interesting, that one that sticks out. That
Well,
was kind of
in the last 2 years we had one with the people completely. And it's not uncommon for someone to flip the home, where the garage is on the right hand side, and they flip the whole floor plan the other way, which doesn't affect value because square footage and everything's there. But we had one where they took out a portion of the house. They took the bonus room out from above the garage, and that took out 400 or 500 square feet out of the thing, and so you reported to the bank, and then they obviously worked it out with the buyer. I don't know if they captured some more money for.
I was going to say, when they close
But
that
that's
construction
part of
loan,
it,
do they have to put
and
more?
that's why on the very first, a new construction anyway, the very first time we go out there, we always measure like the foundation to see if it matches up with the blueprints
Okay.
before it gets too far down the road.
And is the bank calling you to remind you to do that, or you just know as the appraiser that you need to?
It was just
check
part of that
periodically
training
to go out
process.
there
One of the guys that had trained me, and everyone learns from horror stories, and so it was a horror story where the guy said, "I go out there and I measure that house that first time to make sure it
is what they say
exactly
it's going to be."
Because there's been some people where they've purposely committed fraud by making the house a little smaller, maybe pocketing that difference.
Money that they.
Yeah.
That's interesting to hear. Now, as far as the initial construction loan that they'd be applying for, how specific in the details of the home, as far as finishes that they're putting in the home, does that factor in? Because obviously your different floorings or countertop finishes are all factored
sometimes
into
that's the part as an appraiser that we have a little issue with, because sometimes not all builders create detailed blueprints and reports. A lot of allowances, kitchen allowance,
remember the
flooring allowance. Well, it doesn't tell me
how much of that you're
doesn't
actually
tell me
spend
what
in flooring
what components you're using. Is it a Formica countertop or is it going to be a granite countertop? I just know that they're allowing X amount of dollars. So a lot of times I got to call homeowners and interrogate them a little bit and make notes, or because on new constructions a lot of times we don't even meet with homeowners. We just go out to the bare field there and take a picture and then get going. So and sometimes we include the lenders so that they can understand a little bit too what we're looking for and what we need.
Yeah. So typically, would you say that you meet with the homeowner, or you prefer not to?
Well,
is it kind of just personal preference? Maybe?
On new construction, a lot of times we don't, because we should have everything, on paper, because that's basically what we're doing, is basing everything off the paper blueprints and specifications. So the initial aspect of new construction, we go out there and looking at the site, and it's usually a grass or a cornfield or something that's staked off, and that starts the process. And then as we move forward, you ask questions and get better answers, because the computer's pretty specific on sometimes on what it's asking for interior components, and
so just needing to know the specifics of what's going in the home. So, all right. So is there anything else you can think of that would be helpful to know about the appraisal process? And
well, probably the biggest misconception that a lot of homeowners have, and I think it's because of some of the TV shows that are on, that home improvement projects don't always yield, in most cases are not going to yield a dollar for dollar return. Some of it's considered maintenance. If you put a new roof on your house, it's because you're probably going to need it. So, if you were going to sell your house and you had two houses that were exactly alike, and one had a roof that's 2 years old and the other one had one that was 15 years old, you'd probably pay a little bit more and choose the one with a newer roof. But would you pay the full price for a new roof? Probably not. sometimes homeowners get disappointed when we come in and do an appraisal. And
if a homeowner were to do a remodel project, I've kind of always been told that focus on your kitchen and your bathrooms. Would you say that's kind of true when people are looking for updated?
They're the two most expensive rooms in your house typically. So, and I think from a marketing standpoint as well, and that's obviously what we're trying to understand is the market and how they react to certain things, and homes with more modern kitchens. People have kept up with the times, the changes for the most part. Those are the type of buyers that are looking for those things as they look at homes.
And this, just me not knowing, outside the exterior of the home, does landscaping, you always hear people talk about this house has curb appeal, and obviously landscaping can be a significant cost. Does that ever factor into the appraisal, or you just can't go there?
Well, first of all, it's hard to extract out of the marketplace what landscaping is really worth. So that makes it difficult in itself. And then there's probably certain value ranges of homes that there's a certain level of landscaping that should be there. So that's part of that comparable process is, certain markets, they have certain expectations, like granite countertops and Corian and all the different components that they use. There's certain levels of value ranges of homes where those things are kind of the expected norm now.
Yeah. What about, I've always heard pools.
Pools are a big disappointment.
Yeah, that you really can't factor those in at
Well,
all, or
there's, and I don't know the exact cost to build a pool, but if you say it's $45,000 today, and I can say, a lot of times the value range that I've used is for appraisal process is, anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 in this area, so it's really not going to add not adding too much, right? And here's another element behind that too is we live in Indiana, so if pools added value and the market really wanted them, everybody would have a pool.
But
versus
your
Florida,
time frame to use them is so
so it's an over improvement.
Okay.
So and there's other over improvements that people sometimes get pretty grand on pole barns and outbuildings, and sometimes those just don't quite yield the return.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So, anything else exterior wise that you're looking for in a home?
You're looking at just kind of the overall condition. You're looking to see what condition the roof is, and the siding, looking for water damage, or we're not home inspectors, but certain
you can see
certain visual things that if we can see them visually, make sure that foundations don't have big cracks in them, and if they are susceptible to ponding water around the foundation, things that can cause problems. We just kind of look at all that and see what condition the windows are in.
Speaking of foundations, is it up to the appraiser, or do you work with an inspector to know, say the house is on a crawl space? I know inspectors typically have to go under that crawl space. Do you have to go under that crawl space, or do you rely on an inspector to give you a report of obviously it wouldn't be a new construction home, but if you're appraising a home that's going to be on the market? And
we're pretty much looking at the habitable areas of the home.
Okay. So there's certain things that an appraiser may not see.
We're not going to look in attics. We're not going to, unless if it's FHA type. There's certain types of findings out there that the government mandates the appraiser to observe, but for a regular basic appraisal, we're not looking in those areas.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if you got a report from an inspector, looked over that report, and then made your final appraisal, if that was ever the case. Or
in some cases that process, if it's
kind
if
of
we
makes
had
sense
if we
that
had a
it
copy
would
of
be-
it, right? But,
Yeah, because so
but a lot of banks don't require inspections. It's completely up to the homeowner discretion whether they want to get one.
pay for an inspection. And
Right.
see. Which do you think that most clients that you have that you're selling to, do you recommend most of them
in the
get
real
an
estate
inspection?
profession? We're really told to suggest, because there's so many factors and so many elements in a home, to have an inspection done. Or if you've got somebody within your family that knows construction really well, somebody needs to look in the crawl space, somebody needs to look in the attic, and truly to see if there's any flaws up there. Maybe a house had caught on fire before, and everything's covered up and nice, but you look in the attic and you got some charred rafters or something. So it's, I would recommend that somebody, if they're not comfortable with construction of homes, to pay for it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that kind of covers all my questions, unless you feel that there's something else you would like to add.
I just threw my 2 cents worth in about the homeowner's expectations on remodeling. Like I say, don't believe everything you see on TV,
because they make it sound like it's dollar for dollar on TV most
or
of the time.
or return on your investment too.
Yeah,
and it's not always. There's certain things you can do, I'm sure, that really enhance. And you got appraised value, and you got the other element in it too, the marketability. Your house may be more marketable and more appealing to somebody in a competitive environment if you do some of these upgrades. Whether or not you're going to get your money back, that's a whole different thing. But
and speaking of the appraisal price, this is another I just thought of. People, get their taxes, property taxes, and there's that value of your home on property taxes. A lot of times, in my knowledge, it would be typically a little bit lower than what the appraisal price would be. Do you find that true, or do you typically think what they're valuing your home as is comparable to what an appraisal would be?
Well, certain types of property, the assessments are relatively close. Other types of property, the assessment's off because they use different formula. But we have done tax appeal appraisals where people think they're being overtaxed, and sometimes that misconception is they'll call and say, I need you to appraise my house. My taxes are too high. And I say, your taxes are too high. Oh, yeah, I'm paying X amount of dollars a year on my taxes. And I say, okay, what about the assessed valuation? And that really determines everything. I say, would you sell it for what it's assessed at? If they say, yeah, in a heartbeat, then maybe it's over-assessed.
Okay.
Because assessment and tax rate are two different things. And then if they say there's no way I'd sell it for what it's assessed at, and then it's like, you don't have much of an argument.
Yeah. Yep. That it's
So sometimes people just don't understand the difference in the terminology and assessment and tax rate. So, but it's an avenue of business for us, and we have done them for different counties, and sometimes they've helped, and sometimes it varies from county to county how receptive they are to tax appeals.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks again for coming, Chuck, and hopefully you guys have learned a little bit about the appraisal process. And as always, you can find this podcast on iTunes and Spreaker, and you can now see the video portion on YouTube. So thanks again for listening.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.